Perfect. Let's go ahead and kick this off, Peter and team. So first and foremost, thanks everybody for the time today. Welcome to our PizzaCast with one of our solution providers, Arc. Right? They do an awesome job for us in the data center. I'll say cutting edge, right, but not bleeding edge, right? And all the technology that they are able to provide for our customers and how they go about doing things differently. So really excited to have them talk here real fast. A couple of housekeeping items. Right. First, in the chat, you'll see Peter May, his email address. If you're having any issues with your pizzas, please give Peter a quick email. Let him know if it hasn't arrived. We have a concierge with Domino's, and they will be able to tell you whether it's on the way, whether their driver is late, or whatever the issue may be. So if you are having any issues with that, in the chat, Peter's email, give him a quick email. He'll work with our team here to get this done and make sure you get your pizza, right? Obviously, part of this is feeding you while we go along about this. So again, welcome to AIT's PizzaCast with Arc. I'm Mike Arnhart, the CRO, and one of the founders of AIT. Real quickly, before we turn this over, this isn't really about AIT today. This is about our partners in Arc, getting some of you guys familiar with them, allowing them to present on their topics, their solutions. So we're really excited to have them. But real quickly, less than 5 minutes, want to do a quick formal overview of AIT. Some of you are brand new to us right on this call. Some of you have worked with us for a long time. So those of you that have worked with us, thank you very much. Those of you that are new, this will be a very short presentation overview of who AIT is, right? We really have a couple mantras that we live by and how we do it, right? We want to make IT simple, right? At the end of the day, we partner with folks like Arc, specifically in the data center, right? Trying to make it easier for you if you're co-locating, if you're multi-cloud, all of those parts and pieces that Arc brings to the table. We want to make sure that we're bringing them to the forefront of you guys as an option for your technology. Right? What we try and do is IT can be very complex. We want to make it as simple as we possibly can. The gentlemen on this call with Arc do an awesome job of breaking it down. And for those of you that know me personally, you got to break it down really far for me to get it. So they do a fantastic job because I get it with them. So one of our best at making it simple for our customers, ease of use. And frankly, they've been very, very good at helping our customers, right, that are transitioning. We have a couple on the call here that have transitioned over to Arc from other data centers. They allow their contracting team and flexibility with how they start to bill, making sure you're implemented up and running before they're starting to bill, and some of those sort of things that the two gentlemen won't talk about today, but I will. Make it easy for our customers to go and transition, and Arc is one of the great attributes and one of the things that they do very well. Why we do it? At the end of the day, right? We love technology. We have a team of technologists behind the scenes that are always looking at the newest, the latest, and the greatest, and trying to bring that competitive edge in IT for our customers, right? So that's a little bit about who we are, what we do. Our services include on the next page, right? Fully managed. So we can do A to Z in the management side of it. We can do a lot of co-managing, right? That's been really popular with us recently, right? Where our customers do maybe something specific, tier 1 to tier 2. They call on us for tier 3 and above, right? And you'll start to see the other pillars that we do here as well, right? With Arc, the coolest part of Arc is they allow us to do some managed services, access, and allow our customers access to some of their equipment and data center, which allows us to have transparency from start to finish, right? As you guys are all aware, one of the key critical components is cybersecurity as we go along this, right? So they'll be talking about some of the things and ways that they secure their environments that are unique to them. And then above all else, right, network connectivity, network services, uptime, right? You guys all know that if your business is down, it's drastic measures. And most of you are in a place where at the end of the day, right, if your IT is up, right? Nobody's coming to your office and saying, great job, you've kept our systems up and running today, right? Usually it's, holy geez, my system is down, I need help immediately, right? So, our role in this is to make sure that we have the proper engineering and the staffing behind the scenes, working with our partners like Arc to make sure that you are up as much time as you physically need to be, right? With disaster recoveries, and making sure that all of those align to your business strategy with cost and all of those things moving forward. So without me taking any more time, certainly we'd love to talk to you more about some of our pillars as we go along, but this isn't about us. Again, one quick reminder before we turn it over to Jeremy and team at ARC, right? If you are having any issues, Peter May, right? Email in the chat for pizza. Hopefully you guys are all enjoying your pizza, and I'll turn it over to Jeremy and team.
All right. Thanks so much, Michael. Thanks so much. Yeah, I'm Jeremy Peterson. I'm the group product manager here at ARC Data Centers, covering all of our divisions. ARC Data Centers, if you're not familiar, we provide enterprise class digital infrastructure, pride ourselves on reliability, performance, and connectivity. We have purpose-built, owned and operated data centers where we provide co-location services, hybrid cloud solutions, carrier neutral networking, and also security services as well there. So we try to cover a lot of those things as we go through. So with that, I will start sharing my presentation. There we go. All right, so today we're talking about rethinking cloud strategy in 2026. Again, this is more of a strategy conversation. We won't be diving into product demonstrations or anything on what we mean, what we sell. And I think actually looking through my slides, I don't think we really talk much about any of how we productize this, but all of the principles that we put into the products that we do provide and services we provide we'll discuss today. And so they align well with, as Michael said, trying to keep things simple. And the other one we'll talk about today is trying to make things predictable, because I think that's really how cloud strategy has changed over the last few years, is making sure that we have predictable, that performance costs are predictable, we have clarity, reducing some vendor dependency risk, and really aligning infrastructure with our business goals as we go through that. So yeah, as we go through today, these are the sections we'll cover what's changed, why that matters, and really a practical approach to how we restore predictability. And then we'll end with how to approach some next steps in a way that's really right-sized for each organization on there. So really what we're trying to do is keep it business outcome orientated on there. Oops, sorry, there we go. So yeah, so first we'll dive into what we're hearing from IT leaders and why this conversation has changed on that. Used to be that the conversation around cloud was, hey, we have to move to cloud. That was the conversation, right? Like, hey, that's a plan. We need to get into the cloud. We need to take advantage of this. Now, most people have some sort of presence in the cloud, and conversations change to, hey, why is my bill so high? How do I make this run better? So really the questions have shifted from adoptions to how we govern these things. How do we control cost? How do we control utilization? How do we control access on there? So really a big switch from just, hey, we're going to the cloud to, hey, how are we using the cloud? And how do we control that? Here, like I said, it's not just higher pricing, it's reduced predictability as we go through. The biggest pain isn't price anymore, it's planning. When predictability drops, cloud becomes a business risk. When you're going through your budgeting, compliance, growth planning, they all get harder when you can't predict what's getting out there. So like with the model shifts, we're moving from stable renewals to, hey, we have to restructure subscriptions. Bundling that comes in. Hey, are we paying for capabilities not used? Are these things from our vendor being bundled in a way that is valuable to us on there?
I wonder if they delivered a pizza. I'll go check the room.
Wait. Someone's talking. Sorry about that. Yeah, and then when we bundle things together, when your vendors are bundling it, maybe there's fewer levers in your renewals, especially if you're waiting till later in the cycle to start talking to your vendors about renewals on there. What levers are you going to be able to press to get the best deal possible and really right-size things for you on there? And then uncertainty on multi-year planning. When your CFO is going to come in and goes, well, what does this look like over the course of 3 to 5 years? If we're not looking at these things ahead of time, those are going to be answers that IT departments aren't going to be able to answer quickly and confidently in that. And then you're going to be scrambling for those answers somewhat late in the game. So with that, let's talk about what that why predictability breaks down and what can cause it inside an organization in there. So really, vendor changes, they can disrupt strategy on there. And that's a cycle that we want to break because if vendor makes changes and you're under time pressure, decisions can get made to stop the bleeding, not to improve your long-term architecture and your plans. So what does that, drift look like on there? The big thing is, if we're locked into this vendor, we have to do this renewal. Hey, one-time exceptions we'll make to get this renewal done. Those things can become permanent. All of a sudden, buying gets more complicated because we have to have extra tools, different vendors to patch any gaps that weren't covered on renewal because we're trying to save some money on some features. Well, we have to get those features from somewhere else on there. So we can make it really complicated going through on there. And then if you're doing that, you're locking yourself into terms and structures that are going to limit your future options on there once you've signed any long-term agreements within it. And another one that comes up, Michael mentioned security and being able to talk through that. Well, all of a sudden, if your budget changes because you're trying to lock in your cloud business, well, what are some other things that are overlooked then, or you have to defer security and operational improvements to try to protect your budget out there, right? So those are all things that become unpredictable when we go through these vendor changes on there, and we try to be reactive rather than proactive in our decision making. In this 2026, cloud, rather than just being a destination, cloud is an operating model. It's an operating environment that we need to be in there. And we talked about these kind of 4 pillars on here between cost predictability, operational simplicity, security and compliance, and scalable flexibility on there. And if any one of those 4 pillars are weak, the business is going to feel it. Cost, speed, risk, growth constraints across that on there. So like with cost predictability, we want to be able to look at what's our forecast run rate on there. Do we have visibility into our renewals? How do we reduce any surprise charges in there? Again, we want these things to be predictable. Going back to trying to keep things simple. This one actually came up talking to a customer in the last week. He was talking about when he travels on there in their current cloud environment, he has multiple tools that they use to control that. So when he's traveling, he has to go in and try to juggle logging into 2 or 3 different consoles at the same time on there. That becomes tricky. Not just for those situations where you travel from day to day. How are we getting all those things across? And that's going to create more manual steps. How are we automating on there? Are you able to automate that? How are you able to do upgrades? Is that easy, or does that add to complexity? Security and compliance. When we talk about that, we need to govern how everything is accessed. So if it's more complicated, who has access to what? If you have more than one console that you're going into, how do we audit that? How do we segment it on there? Are we sure that within that our backups immutable on there? What type of controls do we have in place on there? And then the making sure that there's flexibility as you scale. What are those options within hybrid environments? What is our capacity plan for growth on there? Are workloads portable among the different environments that we're in? And how do we plan for that? So really need to have each of these pillars strong and have answers on all of them on there so that the business does not feel those growth constraints. Yeah, next is just a simple set of questions that we use to guide structured evaluation as we go through. So really 4 questions everyone should be asking. Are costs predictable over 3 to 5 years? How exposed are we to future licensing changes? We've seen that out in the market Specifically the example that we use is Broadcom. Broadcom licensing looks totally different than it did a few years ago. How has that affected everybody? How do we prepare ourselves for any changes like that in the future on there? If we run into that where we need to change our licensing, go to different vendors, how complex is migration? What does that look like? And we'll dive into some of those maybe a little bit deeper on a couple on the future slides here. And does our architecture support hybrid growth? These are the 4 questions that really separate real reactive renewals from strategic planning. And if you can answer these clearly, you're going to make sure that you have some options in there. As we talked about 3 to 5 year predictability, what's our current run rate? What does that growth look like? And what are our assumptions today around what our renewal is going to look like out there? So let's plan for those scenarios. What's our base today? What's a best case? What's a worst case on those things? Licensing exposure. Let's map some dependencies. What workloads are tied to what features with our licensing out there? Look at our risk of are we single source? Do we have single vendors? What happens if something happens to that vendor? Are there choices out there, or are we locking ourselves into something proprietary with that vendor that we're not going to be able to recreate if something were to happen there? Migration complexity. We have to look at our inventory. What are the dependencies? What's our downtime tolerance? How does that affect your DR plans on there? All those things are going to add to that complexity if you have to do any migrations based off of changes that you're going to see in the cloud. And again, those are questions you're going to want to know ahead of time on there. And then in hybrid growth, where can we place our workloads? Can we put them across the different environments that they have? Where do they go? How does that affect our security and our networking patterns on there, and which environments are able to scale? So all questions that we should have ready answers to go on there. And then evaluating modern alternatives without adding risk. Exploring alternatives doesn't mean that you have to rush into change on there. Modern platforms, they reduce architectural sprawl, but execution and governance are going to determine your success on there. So really, we want to start with options analysis, not rip and replace plans, but just say what are our options? What do those things look like? And then see if you can't run some proof of values with having clearly defined success criteria on there beforehand, not just let's see what it looks like. What does it mean to be successful? What does it mean to not be successful when we do it? And then define some of the cutover risk controls on there. If we are going to test something else out, what are our rollback plans? Not everything's going to work the first time. How does this affect our DR as we're migrating things? Are we going to be ready for DR right off the bat? Really look at some staged migration waves as we go through and have all that planned out as well, so we know what those risks are if we do have to perform some migrations. Yeah, and now we'll shift from really from evaluation to what predictability looks like by design, really. So how does your architecture influence financial outcomes on there? Really, you can look at architecture. You can have a volatile model, as we'll call it here, or a predictable one on there. And this isn't, when we say volatile versus predictable, this isn't public versus private cloud. Is it volatile versus is it just predictable? And predictability comes from a model that's measurable, scalable, and is easily governed by it. Really, so volatile. You're going to see spiky usage charges, surprise add-ons, maybe some shared performance contention on there. Predictable, if you're looking for more predictable, the way we like to do it, node-based capacity planning, very, very clear unit economics. So there aren't any surprise charges. You know exactly what you're paying for, exactly what you're getting, and you can count on a steady costs throughout that, and providing that stable performance envelope. So obviously there isn't any problems on that front as we go through on there. So platform infrastructure, infrastructure and kind of advisory roles as we go through this. The tech alone that you choose isn't going to create stability. Infrastructure foundation and ongoing governance is what sustains that predictability over time on that. So what does strategic managed oversight mean? You need to have quarterly cost and usage reviews. You should be doing that on a regular basis. So we're not trying to do that ad hoc down there. Annual renewal readiness. Every year, hey, when we're getting for renewal, what does that look like? We don't wait for renewal cycles to be upon us. Let's do that proactively every year. What does it look like? How have things changed? How has the environment changed over the last year? And does that affect how ready we would be to renew on there? Life cycle patch cadence planning on the oversight. And again, and the other one that a lot of people don't do, which we, as some of our services like to help with, is DR testing cadence and audit readiness as we go through. So those are just some of the things that we can do to help get those predictable, have a predictable strategy on there, and that we're not scrambling at the last minute trying to do things ad hoc. And that's really where ARC and All In, how we approach it and how we can help. And really the value is combining resilient hosting with practical strategy and execution support. And really, like I said, we focus on clarity. As Michael mentioned at the beginning, we want to keep these things simple. We want to make sure that they're clear so that you're not making decisions forced under pressure as renewals come up or vendor changes come up on there. So really, we help you right-size the engagement on those to your goals on there. Assessment, modeling, phase modernization planning. Like I said, all about control so that you feel you have control and you're not having to be overly reactive. And like I said, making short-term decisions that are going to have long-term implications out there that aren't exactly what you want them to be. Yeah, so now we'll kind of close with, what does that control look like in practice? We want to plan before that renewal pressure comes up on there. So, like we said, on the left, we can see, what a reactive model look like. Those are common because they're fast. You can do a fast renewal model on there, but strategic planning, if you can do that ahead of time, is going to create you options and it's going to reduce risk. Even if you ultimately renew with the same thing that you have now on there, you're going to go into it feeling that you have more control and more confidence in what you do. So as we go through the more strategic model, you can start with evaluate. What's your inventory? What's your renewal timeline? What's our exposure? What are our goals that we're trying to get here? From the architecture standpoint, what's our target state? What do we want underlying principles to be of where we want to get around security, DR, our hybrid cloud situation? And do we have good reference designs across that we can use both internally so that our people understand what we have, and also when you do talk to vendors that you can bring them reference designs that goes, this is what we have today, let's work through this so that you can help us design for the future on there. And then you want to be able to take those and be able to forecast. Like I said, really what you want to be able to do is look out and have 3 to 5 year scenarios on it across your cost, your capacity, your staffing impacts. And again, have that baseline and what's our best and worst case scenario look like, and how does that fit in into these other areas. And then optimize. After we view all those, we want to have a governance loop where we're looking at, when we're doing quarterly reviews, we can standardize, we can do continuous cleanup so that we're not doing those things as kind of our cloud plans are coming up for renewal, that we have to do a bunch of activities on there. If we do those things continuously, right, that's not going to put us in a bad spot when things have to get done, and renewals have to get processed on there. So really, this is kind of the practical way to regain that clarity, structured, repeatable, and it doesn't assume any single destination as we go through. So as we're looking at cost and licensing exposure reviews, we're looking at, again, renewal dates, licensing constructs, bundled feature usage? What's our utilization? Have we had sprawl since the last time that we did these things? Are we really using all the features that we're paying for? Or are there other features that we just don't have, or we're looking for outside vendors to be able to provide us, which creates that complexity on there? And really what you're doing then is creating that 3 to 5 year scenario model on there, which includes your renewal decision timeline on it. And what you're really asking in those questions is, what happens if costs rise 20%? What features are we paying for and not using? So really trying to get a comprehensive overview there. And then you'll want to assess, what does that complexity look like? How many tools are we using? When we upgrade, how much effort is that when new versions are coming out and we have to upgrade our tools? How many manual processes do we have that could be automated across there? What's our DR operational burden? That's another one that again, talking with customers, hey, we have DR plans in place, but man, it's complicated and I'm not sure how this is going to work. When we have to use it, do we have high confidence in it on there? So really, then you're asking questions, how long do these upgrades take? How many consoles do we have to have? How much time are my people spending in maintenance versus being able to innovate on there? How do we improve all these things on there? Reviewing your security and access audits. Who has admin? Who can we prove least privilege? Would an audit pass today when we're looking at things like all our privileged accounts, MFA, segmentation? What are we doing for logging? If an incident comes up on there, are we logging everything, and how long are we retaining those things? As we mentioned before, are we making sure that our backups are immutable so nothing gets affected there? So a lot of really important security and access audit questions we can ask. Get through this to gain that clarity. And then our hybrid and growth alignment. Where's the business going in the next 24 to 36 months or longer? And does the platform support that without any surprise costs? How are we going to grow when we're looking at workload classifications on there? Data latency and gravity. Is the data near where we need it on there? What are our growth forecasts? What are our actual DR needs? Do we need to have everything at the highest level, at the lowest RPO on there? Or, can we take some of that modeling and classify our workloads and spread that out on there? And then the other one, big one lately too, is what do our future initiatives look like? Are we trying to incorporate AI and other analytics in here that are going to affect what that growth looks like that we need to be ready for on it? So having a clear idea of that helps quite a bit as well. So like I said, how is this maybe a little bit different than in the past? This is something that we've been doing more and more of too over the last few years, is looking at more of the long-term cost scenarios out 3 to 5 years rather than just 1 to 2 year cycles. We want to reduce dependency on single vendors on there. I come from the manufacturing world in a past life. That was always, when we were sourcing raw materials, that was always a top concern of our leadership is, can we get that material from other places? What happens if something happens with that supplier on there? But here really the difference is, again, like we've been saying, I think over the last 2 slides, is the difference is proactive evaluation. Not waiting for renewal deadlines to start asking these strategic questions on there. So, if we're looking at 3 to 5 year models out, we're talking about renewal readiness. Readiness starts 9 to 12 months out of that. So planning quite a bit ahead of time, and again, not waiting till last minute so that we're forced into decisions that we don't want to have to make, and making compromises on it. Yeah. So really, the real objective, stability and strategic control. And, what we're talking about today is not, we're not anti any vendor. We're just pro clarity on here. These exercises aren't to replace any specific hypervisor. They're to make sure that we have predictability, flexibility, operational confidence, and strategic control on there so that when you renew, you're renewing with confidence. And if you change, you're changing with a plan, not because you're forced to on there. And I think that's what we're saying is you should evaluate before you renew so that you have options as we go through. And yeah, I think this is actually my last slide. So, to continue the conversation, we can explore these areas together. These aren't, through All In and Arc, these aren't, say, standard package deliverables that we're selling today of doing of talking about these areas. They're more structured conversations we can tailor to everyone's environment and their goals on there. So if some of the things we've talked about, resonate on this, we can follow up and we can right size the next steps based off of you, not just filling out some form that you put in that we think applies to everybody on there. So I think that's my last one. So like I said, that's something that we can help with, and if that's something you're interested in, that's something we'd love to sit down and speak with everybody and figure out what the right next steps are for you and your business. All right, so I believe with that, we can open it up to questions.
You did such a good job, Jeremy. They're all silent, or they're eating, or a combination of both.
Right. Shock and awe.
Are we sure there's no questions? Maybe there's one in there. None here. All right. Awesome. Perfect. Well, I hope everybody was able to enjoy their pizza. Jeremy and team from ARC, we appreciate, number one, your partnership, but number two, you coming on and helping us with some of these questions, concerns, right? Presentation today. I'm sure as we, I thought there was one more question, but
looks like there was one question from Lance.
Yeah, I've not used Nutanix or Azure, so wondering if one is better or more optimal than the other. Good luck with this one, Jeremy.
Yeah, I'll save a big diatribe on this, but this one comes up because we do talk to a lot of people coming in considering Azure out there, and I think from our perspective, if we had our some of our senior leads on this one to talk about, I think he has a very strong opinion of whether you should be going to Azure or not, and I would say it's not favorable on there. We like Netflix just again because as we talked about here, I think with us versus going up into the public cloud, our structures and our costs are going to be much more predictable on that. No surprise SKUs that you're going to have to use, no ingress egress fees that are going to be there. And like I said, our expandability is very predictable between both compute and storage and networking out there. So I think I think it's just a much more, if you want to have more control over what your environment is, I think something that we can offer within our private cloud is better. Because one of the things with going to Azure, going with AWS, it is going to have to be someone's job. Absolutely, it has to be someone's job to oversee what your costs are from month to month and what features you're using and make sure that you don't have sprawl. Someone has to do that. It is going to be unpredictable if no one's overseeing that. So I think that's something that, our private cloud strategies and product structure will make that dependable, and you'll know exactly what's on that bill every month. Ryan, I think you maybe have some thoughts on that one too, if you want to.
Yeah, just a couple of quick things, and I think it's a really good question. I think at the end of the day, just coming from a technical perspective here, pick the right landing spot for the right workload. There are things that make sense to be in the public cloud. With your specific question, if you're moving all of your VMware VMs, I would really take a look at, what are these VMs? What's happening? Are there native things that you can do on the public cloud for these applications? If it's more of a traditional deployment, then looking at Nutanix, or a private cloud offering, something like that. It lends itself a lot better to situations like that. So if you're looking to do object storage and be able to spin things up and spin things down, things that are going to be, able to be really cost controlled in the public cloud. I mean, I think those make a lot of sense, but, I would just take a long look at what you want out of it. What do your applications mean? What kind of availability do they need, globally, regionally, those kind of things. As opposed to, if it's going to be more of a static workload, then that makes more sense there. That's my 2 cents on it.
Yeah. And that's the other one too, going to Azure. I mean, they have a large support infrastructure, but compared to them, we're 24/7 support, and we're completely US based support on there. And that, when you're our direct customer, that's what we help you is we want you to be able to use the infrastructure. We want you to have, and we have 100% uptime SLA guarantee on it with that, versus, you're a number in a queue when you're calling a large organization like Azure on that. So I think much more personalized, and like I said, 24/7 US based support as we go through in there as well. So yeah. Any other questions? Well, if there's nothing else, like I think the guys from All In said, feel free to contact us anytime about follow-up questions about this or anything else. Happy to help. Happy to sit down and schedule some discussions on how we can get you that predictability and control back in your hands as you go through your cloud journey.
Thanks, Jeremy and Ryan. Really appreciate it. And we appreciate our partnership with ARC. So thanks for all you do for us and with us. Thanks for spending some time today. Guys, you will receive from us a follow-up email tomorrow with the deck and a bit more information regarding ARC, how to get into contact with us and or ARC based on what was kind of spoken about today. Like I said, the deck will be in that follow-up email as well. And then as we splice up the recording, clean it up, take out some of you guys don't need to hear us in the first 10 minutes doing our planning before the meeting started. So we'll get that all cleaned up by next week, and we'll get that message out to you guys there too with the recording. So expect that next week. The only other thing that I'd say is, as you guys know, we have these on a monthly basis. We're very pleased to have ARC this month. You'll see as well, we are planning March's PizzaCast. Put it on your calendars for March 19th, same time, same place, and we'll announce who's going to be presenting out next week. We want to give ARC the spotlight though right now. So yeah, much appreciated. If you guys need anything, let us know. If you have any other questions, please feel free to take it offline. And your account executives are a great place to start should you have any questions. Yeah, thank you guys. Jeremy, Ryan, thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Soon.